The gay clown did something wonderful to me at the circus. A night at the circus, a performance like no other, and in the middle of the dazzling lights and laughter, I saw him. The most breathtaking man I had ever laid eyes on. The problem? He was the star clown of the show, hidden beneath makeup and costume. But fate has a way of playing tricks on us. Because when I met him again, without the paint, without the wig, I had no idea he was the man who had already stolen my heart. Get ready for a love story full of magic, emotion, and an unexpected connection that will change everything. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring you more powerful and emotional stories like this one. Now, let's step into the ring, where love performs its greatest act. I never expected my heart to race at a circus. As I walked through the massive red and white striped tent, the smell of buttered popcorn and spun sugar filled the air. The chatter of excited families, the distant call of a ringmaster warming up the crowd. It was all so nostalgic. I had come here with my family, mostly for my little niece, who had been begging to see the show. I was 23, way past the age where the circus should have impressed me. But there was something about the way the lights glowed, the way the air buzzed with anticipation, that made me feel like a kid again. Then the show started, and that's when I saw him. The main act was a clown, bold, energetic, and impossible to ignore. He wasn't like the goofy, over-exaggerated clowns you'd expect. His movements were sharp, athletic, mesmerizing. He flipped effortlessly through the air, balancing on towering stilts before somersaulting into a perfect landing. The crowd erupted in cheers. But I barely breathed. Because when he landed, he pulled off his oversized red hat, revealing his chiseled jawline, piercing blue eyes, and muscular build that no costume could hide. My heart stopped. I didn't even care about the bright white makeup covering his face. His presence was magnetic, his energy infectious. I had never seen someone move like that, with so much confidence, grace, power. And then it happened. Mid-performance, he looked right at me. I froze. Was it just my imagination? A random glance into the crowd? But no. His eyes lingered just for a second too long. A playful smirk tugged at the corner of his lips before he leaped into his next trick. I exhaled, feeling my pulse in my ears. What the hell just happened? The rest of the show was a blur. My family laughed, my niece clapped excitedly, but I couldn't focus on anything except him. By the time the performance ended, I was still glued to my seat, my mind spinning. "I think you liked it more than the kids," my sister teased, nudging my shoulder. I blinked, forcing a laugh. "Yeah, guess it was a good show." She gave me a look, but didn't press further. As we walked out, I glanced back one last time, hoping to see him again. But the performers were gone. The magic of the show was over. And I told myself that's all it was, just a show. I had no idea our paths would cross again, and that, when they did, I wouldn't even recognize him. I couldn't get him out of my head. Days had passed since the circus, but the image of him, the way he moved, the way he looked at me, was burned into my memory like an imprint I couldn't shake. It felt ridiculous. I didn't even know his name. All I knew was that a clown had stolen my breath away, and I didn't even see his real face. I told myself it was nothing, a moment of excitement, a trick of the lights. But deep down, I knew that was a lie. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw him. I tried to distract myself. I went back to my routine, working my shifts at the bookstore, hanging out with friends, pretending everything was normal. But normal felt different now. Then one evening, everything changed. I was on my way home from work, cutting through a quiet street lined with small coffee shops and dimly lit restaurants. It was late, the kind of late where most places were starting to close, leaving the air feeling still and peaceful. That's when I saw him. Not the clown. The man. He was sitting alone at an outdoor cafe, a cup of coffee in his hands, his gaze distant as if lost in thought. And even though I had never seen him without makeup, without the costume, I knew. Broad shoulders, that same confident presence, and those piercing blue eyes, just as intense as I remembered. My feet stopped before my brain caught up. It's him. I felt ridiculous. What was I supposed to do? Walk up to him and say, "Hey, I think I fell for you while you were dressed as a clown. Remember me?" I should have kept walking. I should have ignored it. But then, he looked up. His gaze locked onto mine, and for a second, the world around us faded. Recognition flashed in his eyes. Not because he knew who I was, but because something was there. A pull. A connection. The same thing I had felt that night at the circus. I didn't move. He didn't either. And then, he did something that made my heart stop. He smiled. Not a big grin, not the exaggerated expression of a performer, but a small, knowing smirk. Like he could tell I was debating whether or not to walk over. And before I lost my nerve, I did. I swallowed my nerves and stepped closer, my voice barely steady. "Mind if I sit?" He studied me for a second, as if trying to place me. Then he nodded toward the chair across from him. "Go ahead." I sat down, feeling the weight of the moment pressing against my chest. Up close, he was even more breathtaking. Strong jawline, slight scruff on his face, an effortless confidence that made me feel both nervous and excited at the same time. "I don't usually do this," I admitted, forcing a chuckle. "Do what?" His voice was smooth, deep. "Sit down with strangers," I said. He raised an eyebrow, amused. "Then why did you?" "Because I saw you at the circus. Because I haven't stopped thinking about you since. Because I feel like this moment is supposed to happen." Instead, I shrugged. "I don't know. You just looked interesting." He tilted his head slightly, studying me. "You sure we haven't met before?" My breath hitched. If only he knew. "No," I lied. "I don't think so." He nodded slowly, as if not entirely convinced. "I'm Ethan." The name settled in my chest, solid and real. Ethan. I repeated it in my head, letting it replace the image of the painted face from that night. "I'm Jason," I said, offering my hand. He took it, his grip firm but warm. And just like that, everything changed. Ethan. His name was Ethan. It felt strange sitting across from him like this, knowing that I had already fallen for him before we even spoke. But he didn't know that. He had no idea that I had seen him before, that I had been captivated by him the moment he stepped into the spotlight under the big top. And I wasn't going to tell him. Not yet. We talked. And to my surprise, the conversation flowed easily. He was sharp, funny, and effortlessly charming. The kind of person who could make you forget the world around you just by the way he spoke. "So, Jason," he said, stirring his coffee lazily. "What made you stop and sit with me?" I hesitated, gripping my cup a little tighter. "I told you, you looked interesting." Ethan smirked. "That's vague." I laughed, trying to keep it light. "Okay, fine. You looked familiar." His eyebrow lifted slightly. "Familiar?" Shit. Was I being too obvious? I cleared my throat. "Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I saw you around town before or something." Ethan hummed as if trying to recall. "Maybe." Then, after a beat, "You ever go to the circus?" My heart nearly stopped. For a split second, I swore he knew, that he was playing some kind of game with me, waiting to see if I would admit it. I forced a casual nod. Yeah, a few days ago, actually, with my family. Ethan leaned back in his chair, watching me. Did you like it? I swallowed. Yeah, it was unforgettable. Something flickered in his expression. A shadow of a smirk, like he was amused by something I wasn't in on. I wanted to ask. I wanted to say, do you know who I am? Do you remember looking at me in the crowd? But I didn't. Instead, I let the conversation drift into something easier. Music, travel, stupid little things that didn't feel stupid at all when it was with him. And before I knew it, hours had passed. The cafe was nearly empty now, chairs stacked on tables, the waitstaff subtly waiting for us to take the hint and leave. Ethan stretched, glancing at his watch. Damn, didn't realize it was this late. I smiled. Guess time flies when you're having a good time, he finished, grinning. I felt my face heat up. Yeah. He stood, and for a moment I worried this was it. That he'd say goodbye and we'd part ways, and I'd spend the rest of my life kicking myself for not saying more. But then, he hesitated. He looked at me, his blue eyes unreadable. Then he said, You want to take a walk? My stomach flipped. Yeah, I'd like that. We left the cafe and walked down the quiet streets, the night air crisp but not cold. I could feel the space between us, close but not quite touching. Every time our arms brushed, I swore I felt electricity shoot through me. We ended up by a park, sitting on a bench under a street lamp. The silence wasn't awkward. It was charged, like something was building between us. Ethan exhaled and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Can I tell you something weird? I turned to him. Of course. He hesitated. I feel like I've met you before. My breath caught in my throat. He glanced at me. It's stupid, right? Just one of those déjà vu things. I forced a chuckle, my heart slamming against my ribs. Maybe. He studied me for a moment. Or maybe we were supposed to meet. I swallowed hard. Maybe we were. The air felt thick, the space between us too small, too big, not enough all at once. I didn't know what was happening. I just knew I didn't want it to stop. Ethan shifted slightly, like he was about to say something else, but before he could, his phone buzzed. He sighed, pulling it out. Sorry, work call. I blinked. This late? He gave me a small, apologetic smile. Yeah, long hours. He didn't say what he did for work, and I didn't ask. Guess I should go, he said, standing. But can I see you again? I couldn't breathe. Yeah, I managed. I'd like that. His lips curved up slightly. Good. And just like that, he was gone. I watched him walk away, feeling something I had never felt before. Something bigger than a crush, bigger than infatuation. I was falling. And I had no idea that the man I was falling for was the same man who had already stolen my heart that night under the circus lights. I couldn't stop thinking about him. It was ridiculous. I had met Ethan for one night, one conversation over coffee, one walk through the city. But it felt like something had shifted inside me. Like I had been waiting for that moment without even realizing it. And now, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something I was missing. It wasn't just the attraction, though that was undeniable. It was the way he made me feel. Like I had known him forever. Like we were picking up from something that had already started long before we met. But as much as I tried to focus on that, something else gnawed at the back of my mind. He had left so abruptly. That work call, the way he didn't tell me what he did, the way he looked at me, almost like he was waiting for me to put something together. It wasn't just in my head. Something wasn't adding up. I told myself it didn't matter, that I should just enjoy the fact that Ethan wanted to see me again. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something I didn't know, and I wasn't prepared for how I was going to find out. A week passed. We had been texting, nothing too intense, just the kind of playful, get-to-know-you banter that made my heart race every time his name popped up on my screen. Then, out of nowhere, Ethan texted, "Come see me tonight." My stomach flipped. Was this a date? Or something else? I stared at the message for a full minute before finally replying. "Where?" The response came instantly. "The circus." My heart stopped. I stared at my phone, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. The circus. The same circus where I had first seen him. The same night I had fallen for a man I never thought I'd meet again. No. It couldn't be. I told myself it was a coincidence. That maybe he worked there. Maybe he just liked the atmosphere. Maybe I was just being crazy. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I just didn't want to believe it. The big top looked the same as the night I had been there with my family. The same towering red and white tent, the same neon lights glowing in the night. But this time, everything felt different. I walked inside, my pulse hammering. The air smelled of popcorn and sawdust, and the excited chatter of the crowd buzzed around me. And then, as the lights dimmed, I saw him. Not Ethan. The clown. My breath caught in my throat. He moved across the ring just like I remembered. Graceful, powerful, commanding. The way his body shifted, the way he carried himself. It was him. It had always been him. Ethan. I gripped the armrest of my seat as the realization crashed over me. I had fallen in love with him before I even knew who he was. My hands were shaking. Why didn't he tell me? Did he think I wouldn't figure it out? Was this a test? A joke? But then, something happened that made my heart stop. Mid-performance, Ethan looked straight at me, just like before. But this time, I knew. I wasn't just some stranger in the audience anymore. He knew I was here. He had invited me. This was intentional. And for the first time, I saw the truth in his eyes. He had been waiting for me to figure it out. I couldn't breathe. The realization hit me like a tidal wave, knocking the air from my lungs. Ethan was the clown. The same man I had been mesmerized by under the circus lights. The one who had stolen my breath with just a glance. The one whose performance had made my heart race like nothing ever had before. And he knew I was here. He had invited me, planned this. But why? I barely registered the rest of the performance. My mind was spinning, my hands gripping my knees as I sat frozen in my seat. What did this mean? Why hadn't he told me? And more importantly, why did it feel like he had been waiting for me to figure it out? When the show ended, the crowd erupted into cheers, but I didn't move. I couldn't. My heart pounded as I watched Ethan disappear behind the curtain. Then, before I could even process my next move, a text buzzed on my phone. "Ethan, meet me outside." I swallowed hard, staring at the message. This was it. I forced myself to my feet, my legs feeling unsteady as I weaved through the crowd. My thoughts were a blur. What was I supposed to say? Was I angry? Confused? Was this some kind of game to him? But when I stepped outside, all of those questions disappeared. Because there he was, standing beneath the glow of the circus lights, his makeup now wiped away, his blue eyes watching me with something unreadable. The moment I saw him, My breath hitched. It wasn't a game. This was real. I stopped a few feet away, my pulse hammering. "You could have told me." Ethan exhaled slowly, his hands in his pockets. "Would you have believed me?" I hesitated. Probably not. "But I recognized you that night," I said, my voice softer now. "I knew there was something about you." A small smirk tugged at his lips. "Yeah. Same." Silence stretched between us. The carnival music played softly in the distance, blending with the chatter of people still lingering after the show. Finally, I broke the tension. "Why did you invite me here?" Ethan took a step closer. "Because I wanted you to see me." I swallowed. "I saw you that first night." His voice dropped, and this time there was no teasing, no smirk, just honesty. "No, Jason. I mean the real me." My chest tightened. The way he was looking at me, the way his words hit something deep inside me. I felt it. This wasn't just a coincidence. I had been drawn to him from the start. And now, standing here in front of him, I understood why. Ethan took another step closer. "So, now that you know the truth, do you regret meeting me?" I didn't even think. I just closed the distance between us. "No," I said, barely above a whisper. "I don't." A flicker of something passed through his eyes. Something intense, something undeniable. And before I could even take another breath, he kissed me. The moment his lips met mine, everything else disappeared. The circus, the past, the uncertainty. None of it mattered. Because this was real. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Ethan's lips were warm, his touch hesitant at first, like he was waiting for me to pull away. But I didn't. I couldn't. The moment our mouths met, something inside me clicked, like I had been waiting for this, for him without even knowing it. The sounds of the circus faded into the background. The flashing lights, the distant laughter of children, the muffled roar of an announcer, it all blurred into nothing. All that existed was him. When we finally pulled apart, Ethan exhaled a soft laugh, his forehead resting against mine. "So, that happened." I let out a breathless chuckle. "Yeah, it did." His fingers traced lightly over my wrist, his touch gentle but deliberate. "Tell me the truth," he said. "Did you know? Before tonight?" I swallowed, my heart still racing. "I didn't know for sure, but I felt it." Ethan's smirk returned, softer this time. "So, you really did fall for a clown?" I rolled my eyes. "You make it sound so weird." He grinned. "Because it is." I laughed, shaking my head. "Yeah, maybe." Then, more seriously, I added, "But I didn't fall for the clown, Ethan. I fell for you." His smirk faded, his blue eyes locking onto mine. "Say that again." I swallowed. "I fell for you." The way he looked at me then, like I was the only person in the world, sent my heart into a freefall. Ethan cupped the back of my neck, his touch firm but careful. "Jason." He hesitated, his thumb brushing over my skin. "I don't do this. I don't..." He sighed. "I wasn't supposed to meet you." My stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" His jaw clenched, like he was searching for the right words. "The circus. It's temporary. I travel. I don't..." He let out a short breath. "I don't stay." A sharp pang hit my chest. I should have known. Of course, he wasn't here permanently. Of course, this couldn't last, but still, I wasn't ready to let him go. I met his gaze. So don't stay, but don't disappear either. Ethan stared at me, searching my face for something, doubt, hesitation, an excuse to walk away. He didn't find one. A slow, almost disbelieving smile tugged at his lips. You're really not scared off by all of this, are you? I shook my head, not even a little. He let out a breath, relieved maybe. Then he pulled me in again, kissing me slow and deep like he was memorizing me, like he was deciding right then and there that whatever this was, he wasn't going to let it slip away. And as I kissed him back, I knew this was just the beginning. The circus might leave, the tents might come down, but Ethan wasn't going anywhere, and neither was I.